March 15th, 1927, 11:47 p.m. Johnny Sullivan counted the blood-stained bills for the third time, $75,000, scattered across his kitchen table like pieces of his shattered soul. His wife Sarah lay dying in the bedroom, her lung cancer spreading through her body like wildfire, while the Torrino family's blood money promised the one thing that could save her life. What Johnny didn't know as he stared at the cash was that Al Capone had been watching him for weeks, studying his desperation, waiting to see if his most trusted lieutenant would choose love over loyalty. But here's what would destroy Johnny's world in the coming days. Al Capone had known about Sarah's illness for months, had known about the Torrino family's offer for weeks, and had deliberately chosen not to help, not because he didn't care, but because he needed to know if the man he considered a son would sell his soul to save the woman he loved. The test that began that night would end with Chicago weeping, not for Johnny's betrayal, but for the innocence that died when love became a weapon. What made Johnny's situation tragic wasn't that he couldn't get help for Sarah's medical bills. It was that help was sitting 30 blocks away in Al Capone's office, and Johnny had no idea that his boss was watching him suffer as part of a psychological experiment that would determine the fate of everyone Johnny had ever cared about. To understand what happened in March 1927, you need to understand the relationship between Al Capone and Johnny Sullivan. Johnny wasn't just another soldier in the Chicago outfit. He was the young war veteran that Al had hired in 1917, the man who had earned Al's trust through 10 years of absolute loyalty. Johnny had never asked Al for anything personal, had never mixed business with his private life, had never requested special treatment or financial help for his family problems. That independence, that refusal to blur the lines between professional and personal relationships, was exactly what Al Capone had been watching and testing. Johnny's desperate situation with Sarah's illness wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was the perfect laboratory for Al to discover whether Johnny's loyalty was based on genuine love or simple financial dependence. But Al's test would prove that some experiments are too dangerous to conduct and some knowledge is too devastating to possess. February 18th, 1927. 4 weeks before the betrayal, Dr. William Harrison delivered the news that would change Johnny Sullivan's life forever. Sarah's lung cancer had progressed to stage 4. Without immediate treatment, she had 6 to 8 weeks to live. The experimental therapy at Massachusetts General Hospital offered hope, but the cost was staggering: $75,000. Johnny sat in the doctor's office, holding Sarah's hand while his world collapsed around him. $75,000 was more money than he had ever seen, more than he could earn in a lifetime of working for Al Capone. "Doctor," Johnny said quietly, "is there any other option? Any other treatment? Any payment plan? Anything?" Dr. Harrison shook his head sadly. "The experimental treatment is her only chance, and it requires full payment before treatment can begin." "I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan." Johnny walked out of that hospital knowing that he had 6 weeks to find $75,000 or watch the woman he loved die. What he didn't know was that Al Capone had been in contact with Dr. Harrison for 2 days, tracking Johnny's situation and making a decision that would haunt both men forever. February 20th, 1927, 2 weeks before the betrayal, Al Capone sat in his office at the Lexington Hotel, reading a detailed report on Johnny Sullivan's financial situation. Johnny had exactly $3,847 in savings, owned a modest house with an $8,000 mortgage, and earned $150 per week working for the Chicago outfit. There was no possible way Johnny could raise $75,000 through legitimate means. Frank Nitti stood beside Al's desk, holding a folder containing bank statements and medical records. "Boss," Nitti said carefully, "Johnny's got no idea how bad Sarah's situation is. He's been borrowing money for smaller medical bills, but he doesn't know about the big treatment cost yet." Al studied the numbers for several minutes. "Has he asked for help? Has he mentioned Sarah's illness to anyone in the organization?" "No, boss. Johnny keeps his personal life separate. He's never asked for anything." Al made a decision that would define everything that followed. "Good. I want to see what he does when he finds out about the $75,000. I want to know if Johnny Sullivan is loyal because he loves me or because he needs me." "You're not going to help him?" "I'm going to watch him," Al replied. "Sometimes you have to see what people do when they think they're alone to understand who they really are." What Al didn't anticipate was that his test would create an opportunity for his enemies to turn his most trusted friend into a weapon against him. February 25th, 1927, 18 days before the betrayal. Vincent Torrino received intelligence that would change the course of Chicago's criminal war. His informants had discovered that Johnny Sullivan's wife was dying, that the treatment would cost $75,000, and that Johnny was becoming increasingly desperate. "This is perfect," Vincent told his sons during their weekly strategy meeting. "Capone's most trusted man is facing a crisis, and Capone isn't helping him. We can exploit this." Michael Torrino studied the intelligence reports. "You think Johnny would betray Capone for money?" "I think a desperate man will do anything to save the woman he loves," Vincent replied. "And if Johnny won't betray Capone voluntarily, we can make the betrayal look like an accident." The Torrino family began planning an approach that would appeal to Johnny's desperation while making the betrayal seem like a business transaction rather than personal treachery. March 3, 1927. 12 days before the betrayal. Johnny Sullivan received the phone call that would damn his soul. Vincent Torrino's voice was sympathetic, understanding, offering exactly what Johnny needed to hear. "Johnny, I heard about Sarah's situation. I'm sorry. Cancer is a terrible thing." Johnny immediately became suspicious. "What do you want, Torrino?" "I want to offer you a business opportunity. No charity, no handouts, just a straightforward transaction. Information in exchange for payment." "What kind of information?" "Details about Capone's next major liquor shipment. Routes, timing, security arrangements. We're not looking to hurt anyone, just redirect some cargo. $75,000 for one piece of information." Johnny felt his blood turn to ice. The amount wasn't coincidental. Vincent Torrino knew exactly what Johnny needed and exactly what he was willing to do to get it. "I need time to think," Johnny said. "Of course, but don't think too long. Time isn't something Sarah has much of." March 5, 1927. 10 days before the betrayal. Johnny made his decision in Sarah's hospital room, watching her sleep fitfully while cancer consumed her body. She had perhaps 2 weeks left, and the money to save her was one phone call away. "I'll do it," Johnny told Vincent during their second conversation. "But I have conditions. No one gets hurt. This is just about cargo." "Absolutely," Vincent lied. "We're businessmen, not killers. The money will be delivered to you within an hour of receiving the information." What Johnny didn't understand was that Vincent had no intention of simply stealing cargo. The Torrino plan involved ambushing Al's convoy, killing his soldiers, and sending a message that the Chicago outfit was vulnerable. Johnny wasn't just betraying business information, he was providing intelligence that would result in the deaths of men he had worked with for years. March 10, 1927, 5 days before the betrayal. Al Capone received the intelligence report that confirmed his worst fears and validated his darkest suspicions. Johnny Sullivan had agreed to betray him to the Torrino family in exchange for exactly the amount needed to pay for Sarah's medical treatment. Frank Nitti placed the surveillance photographs on Al's desk, showing Johnny's meetings with Vincent Torrino. "Boss," Nitti said quietly, "we can stop this before it happens. We can arrest Johnny, eliminate the Torrinos, prevent the whole thing." Al stared at the photographs for several minutes, seeing the man he had raised like a son shaking hands with his enemies. "No," Al said finally. "I want to see if he'll actually go through with it. I want to know if Johnny Sullivan is capable of trading other people's lives for his wife's." "But boss, if we let this play out, people could die." "People are going to die anyway," Al replied coldly. "The question is whether Johnny's betrayal will be worth Sarah's life." Al made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He would let Johnny's betrayal proceed, not to save his friend, but to discover the true nature of love, loyalty, and the price people were willing to pay for both. March 15, 1927, 2 p.m. Johnny Sullivan gave Vincent Torrino the information that would lead to bloodshed, betrayal, and the destruction of everything Johnny held sacred. The convoy carrying Al's liquor shipment would travel down Michigan Avenue at 7 p.m. with light security because it was considered a routine delivery. "Your wife's medical expenses have been transferred to Massachusetts General Hospital," Vincent told Johnny. "Sarah can begin treatment immediately." Johnny felt relief flood through his body as he realized he had successfully traded his soul for his wife's salvation. Sarah would live, and that was all that mattered. But Johnny had underestimated both Vincent's ruthlessness and Al Capone's capacity for devastating revenge. March 15, 1927, 7 p.m., the ambush unfolded exactly as Vincent had planned, but not as Johnny had expected. When the Torrino soldiers attacked Al's convoy on Michigan Avenue, they found themselves caught in a perfectly orchestrated counter-ambush. Al had used Johnny's intelligence to set a trap, positioning his own soldiers along the route in advance. The gun battle lasted 12 minutes and left 14 Torrino soldiers dead, including Vincent's eldest son, but the victory came with a price that would haunt Johnny forever. 3 of Al's men died in the crossfire, men who might have lived if Johnny had never provided the information that started the confrontation. Among the dead was Tommy Chen, a 22-year-old soldier who had just gotten married. His wife was 3 months pregnant. March 15, 1927, 11:47 p.m. Johnny Sullivan sat in his kitchen, counting the $75,000, while trying to process the news that 3 men had died because of information he had provided. The money felt heavier than lead, stained with blood he had never intended to spill. The phone rang at exactly midnight. "Hello, Johnny." Al Capone's voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of sadness that made Johnny's blood freeze. "Al, I can explain." "I know why you did it," Al interrupted. "I know about Sarah, about the money, about the treatment. I know about all of it, Johnny, including the fact that Tommy Chen died tonight because you chose the Torrino's money over asking me for help." Johnny felt his world collapse. "Al, please. I was trying to save my wife." "And you did," Al replied. "Sarah's going to live, Johnny. The cancer treatment will work. But here's what's going to happen. Everyone else you care about is going to pay the price for what you bought with betrayal." March 16, 1927, the morning after. Al Capone's revenge began not with violence but with revelation. Johnny's brother Patrick received a visit from 2 of Al's men, who explained that Johnny had betrayed the organization and caused the deaths of 3 soldiers. "Your brother chose to save his wife by getting other people killed," one of the men explained gently. "Mr. Capone wants you to know that Johnny's actions have consequences for everyone who shares his name." By the end of the day, Patrick had lost his job, his apartment lease had been terminated, and everyone he knew in Chicago had been told about his brother's betrayal. March 17, 1927, second day of Johnny's punishment. Johnny's mother received the news that would break her heart forever. Her son, the boy she had raised to be honorable and loyal, had betrayed the man who had given their family everything for 10 years. "Mrs. Sullivan," Al's lieutenant said as he sat in her living room, "Johnny traded 3 young men's lives for his wife's medical bills. He chose to become a killer rather than ask for help." Johnny's mother, who had always been proud of her son's integrity, was devastated by the knowledge that Johnny had become someone she no longer recognized. "I don't have a son named Johnny anymore," she told her neighbors. "That boy died when he decided other people's children were worth less than his wife." March 18, 1927, third day of Johnny's punishment. Sarah, now receiving treatment in Boston and unaware of what Johnny had done to pay for it, called to share good news about her condition. "The doctors say the treatment is working," Sarah said, her voice full of hope. "The tumors are shrinking. I'm going to beat this, Johnny." Johnny listened to his wife's joy while knowing that her recovery had been purchased with the lives of 3 men, including a young father who would never see his child born. "I'm glad," Johnny said, though the words felt like glass in his throat. "However you got the money for this treatment," Sarah continued. "Whatever you had to do, thank you. You saved my life." Johnny hung up the phone and wept, understanding for the first time that saving one life could damn a soul forever. March 20, 1927, fifth day of Johnny's punishment. Al Capone made the move that would complete Johnny's psychological destruction. He visited Sarah in the Boston hospital, telling her the truth about how her medical bills had been paid. "Sarah," Al said gently, sitting beside her hospital bed, "there's something you need to know about your husband." Al explained Johnny's betrayal, the deaths that had resulted, and the choice Johnny had made to save her life at the cost of other people's lives. 3 men died so you could live," Al concluded. "One of them was 22 years old, newly married, expecting his first child. Johnny chose your life over his." Sarah listened in stunned silence, her face growing pale as she understood the full scope of what Johnny had done. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because," Al replied, "I want you to live with the knowledge of what your life cost. I want you to understand that every day you live is a day that 3 other people will never see." March 21, 1927, sixth day of Johnny's punishment. Sarah called Johnny from her hospital bed, her voice cold and broken. "I know what you did," she said. "Al told me about the betrayal, about the men who died, about the choice you made." Johnny felt his heart shatter. "Sarah, I was trying to save you." "By becoming a murderer?" she replied. "By trading other people's lives for mine?" By destroying everything we built together on a foundation of honor and loyalty? I had no choice. You had choices, Sarah said, her voice becoming stronger. You could have asked Al for help. You could have found another way. You could have let me die with dignity, rather than live with blood on my hands. The silence stretched between them for several seconds before Sarah spoke again. I'm going to live, Johnny, but I'm not going to live with a man who trades children's fathers for medical bills. Don't call me again. March 22, 1927, 7th day of Johnny's punishment. Johnny lost everything in a single day. His wife divorced him by telegram. His mother disowned him. His brother moved to another state. His friends stopped acknowledging his existence. The men he had worked with for 10 years treated him like a ghost. Al Capone's revenge was complete without a single act of violence. Johnny had saved his wife's life, but destroyed everything that made his own life worth living. March 25, 1927, 10th day after the betrayal. Johnny Sullivan was found by Chicago police, sitting in Millennium Park at dawn, talking to himself about choices and consequences. When officers asked what was wrong, Johnny could only repeat the same phrase, "I saved her, but I killed everything else." Johnny was committed to a psychiatric facility, where doctors diagnosed him with complete mental breakdown caused by overwhelming guilt and moral injury. 6 months later, Al Capone visited Johnny in the hospital. "I want you to know," Al said, standing outside Johnny's cell, "that Sarah recovered completely. The cancer is gone. She's healthy and alive." Johnny looked up with empty eyes. "Did the right thing? You saved the woman you loved," Al replied. "But you destroyed the man she loved. Was it worth it?" Johnny stared at Al for a long moment before answering. "Ask me in 50 years, he said quietly. "When I'm dying alone and Sarah's living with someone who didn't have to kill people to keep her alive." Al walked away from that meeting, understanding something about love that he had never comprehended before. Sometimes the greatest acts of love require the greatest acts of betrayal, and sometimes saving someone means destroying everything that made you worth saving. Johnny Sullivan spent the rest of his life in psychiatric care, never fully recovering his sanity, never escaping the knowledge that love could be both salvation and damnation. Sarah Sullivan lived to be 91 years old, cured of cancer but never free from the knowledge that 3 men had died so she could see another sunrise. Al Capone's message to Chicago was clear. Even the purest motivations could be corrupted into weapons against him. But the real tragedy wasn't Johnny's punishment or Sarah's guilt. It was the way love itself had been transformed from something beautiful into something that destroyed everything it touched. If this story of impossible choices and devastating consequences moved you, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who understands that sometimes saving the people we love requires sacrificing everything we believe in. Drop a comment below. Do you think Johnny made the right choice, or should he have let Sarah die rather than betray Al Capone? Turn those notifications on, because next week we're telling the story of how Al Capone's final confrontation with federal justice became the end of an era in organized crime. Remember, in the world of loyalty and love, the most devastating betrayals come not from hatred, but from the desperate attempts to save what we cannot bear to lose. And sometimes, the price of one life is the destruction of everyone else who made that life worth living.